There isn't a team with a more hectic offseason at the quarterback position than FAMU in 2025. I think they may be done adding players to the roster, though. Oh, yeah, it's Locked On HBCU. Play my music.
You are Locked On HBCU, your daily podcast covering HBCU sports. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, family? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On HBCU podcast, your number one daily one-stop shop for everything HBCU athletics, Monday through Friday. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And now, of course, I'm Darrion Gray, a.k.a. the Mouth of the South, Texas Southern alum and former TSU Herald Sports editor and current contributing writer at USA Today's Saints Wire and site expert at Who Dat Dish. Thank you for going on this journey with me. Making Locked On HBCU your first listen of the day every day. And remember, just because the mic cuts off does not mean that the journey is over. Just means it's time to follow me on Twitter at South Exclusives. Starts with an S and ends with an S. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. New customers can go to Game Time, download the app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege to get $20 off your first purchase. We'll wrap up today's episode with a look at the home and home series between Norfolk State women's basketball and Duke women's basketball. In segment 2, somebody said Tuskegee had the hardest schedule in the SIAC. Upon further evaluation, this is a tough slate for Tuskegee. But no one, and I mean no one, you can go to any school as long as they're in HBCU, because this is Locked On HBCU. You can go D1, you can go D2, you can go NAIA. Find me the school, find me the university that has had a more hectic offseason at the quarterback position than Florida A&M. And listen, I mean, this is no disrespect. They may have done all of this and found themselves a quality starting quarterback, but they've gone in so many directions that they made me question one of my most solid pieces of logic that I have on this show. And it's the idea, it's the premise that when you get a quarterback after spring practice, that is going to be your guy. Now, I can't say that with FAMU because they've gotten 3 of them, 1 left, but they've gotten 3. The latest player to be added in this quarterback, is it even a carousel? In this quarterback battle royal. That's what it feels like at this point, is Jett Petty. This comes from Tallahassee Democrat. They say Petty is FAMU's 5th quarterback pick of this offseason, joining R.J. Johnson, R.J. Mays, Tyler Jefferson, and Roman Purcell. The Rattlers returning quarterbacks include Traven Green and Bryson Martin. I'm going to X some of these guys out in a little bit, but it's the idea that you just named 5 quarterbacks that FAMU has picked up this year, and you didn't even name maybe the most important one of them all, and that is CJ Montes. The reason I find CJ Montes to be the most important quarterback to FAMU's offseason is because it isn't a hectic quarterback offseason if it wasn't for his departure. Montes commits to FAMU, and that hype train was high. That hype train had a lot of steam, and it was moving until it wasn't. But if CJ Montes stays at FAMU, I don't know if we even see R.J. Johnson. I don't know if we see Jett Petty. I don't know if we see these players. To me, CJ Montes' decision to step away from Florida A&M and go back to Kent State, that's the domino that put all of this into motion. Because he was the guy that you felt confident about. You've seen him at Fordham. You've seen him on the FCS level play at a high level. Can you say that about anybody else? He's the guy who you've seen play at the FCS level at a high level, so there's no need to add more people. If I got CJ Montes, I'm pretty confident he's going to be my starting quarterback. Why do I need to go add the RJ Johnson? Why do I need to go get this guy out of the JUCO ranks? See, one thing I do stay with is that if you grab a quarterback after spring ball, that sends a statement on how you feel about the players that were on your roster already. So if you want to talk about Tyler Jefferson, you want to talk about Traven Green, you want to talk about Bryson Martin, right? You want to talk about these players. How do you really feel about them? I don't think that you have the utmost confidence. They can be quality players, but you aren't sure yet. And I think we need to be very accepting that not being sure is not an insult. Sometimes you just aren't certain. I would like to be certain about my quarterback position walking out of the spring. That would be an ideal situation, but everything isn't ideal. So when I say that they're not sure about Tyler Jefferson, it does not mean that I'm saying they're putting him in the trash. It does not mean that I'm saying he can't be your starting quarterback. It's just that for me, you're not sold. You go get somebody that you think will have you sold. And the most times I view that as being the front runner. But when you go add Tyler Jefferson and you add Jett Petty, I can't use that same logic because does it go Petty, Johnson, Jefferson? Is that the priority list? Because Petty was the last one who was added. Before him, it was Johnson. Before him, it was Jefferson running through the spring. So I don't know if I can necessarily sit here and tell you that they weren't sold on Jefferson, so they added in Johnson. And then Johnson was there for a little bit. They weren't sold on him, so they went to go get Petty. I don't feel like that's the case. But what I do feel is that this is shaping up for a three-man race for Florida A&M over the course of the summer and possibly even extending into the spring. The Orange Blossom Classic is no longer Jackson State versus FAMU. So it's not as if week one has this huge significance on your season. Of course, the Rattlers would want to beat Howard. I think that this is a battle between two marquee brands. I think this is a battle between two teams that are at the top of their conference, or amongst the top of their conference, I should say, or have the expectation to be there. They're two teams who are looking for a bounce back, and starting off week one with a W would be key to having a bounce back. There are reasons that you want to win this game outside of just pure competitiveness. At the same time, though, you can afford to drop it. You can afford to play around and see, is it Jefferson? Is it Johnson? Is it Petty? You can experiment a little bit if you need to. This is not the way that I would suggest to go about it. But if you absolutely have to experiment with different quarterbacks in the roster, or excuse me, in the lineup, then you have the ability to do that, because the games don't really matter until you get to Alabama State on September 27th. The games don't mean anything for your long-term future. If you lose every single out-of-conference game and then you go undefeated in conference play, guess who is going to be present at the Celebration Bowl? That's what I mean when I say that this doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter in the long run. I hate that about college football, by the way. It actually really disappoints me. But at the same time, that is how it goes. Specifically, let me not say college football. Specifically here, that's actually not how it goes in a lot of other places where you're trying to get to the playoffs, because perception is huge in college football. It's a much bigger thing. It's actually not a thing in the NFL. It's all about your record. People talk about you based on perception, but where you stack up against other teams when you get to the postseason is not about perception. It's only about what you did on the record. So as far as this goes, it don't matter what you do in the offseason or in the out-of-conference schedule. But yeah, FAMU says, screw your conventional wisdom. Throw that out of the window. This idea that we go get a quarterback after the spring practice and he's going to be the leader, doesn't work anymore. I can't put it in a place. I can only keep one half of my logic, and that's that you were not satisfied with what you saw during the spring practice and you wanted at least more competition. I think that this will be it. You go get CJ Montes. I think I would have given him the reins. That was an easy one to say. When Montes left and you brought in Johnson, I said, okay, he's the guy. But now that you brought in Johnson and Petty, I just got to give it up, and we just got to wait. Petty, for the record, comes from the JUCO ranks. So all these other guys, I think Jefferson, Johnson, and Montes came from the FBS. I think so. But Petty comes up from the JUCO ranks, and last year he had 270 yards per game, which was for best in his conference, good for best in his conference. Had a really strong touchdown to interception ratio. He had a 59 completion percentage, but his TD to interception was nearly 5-1. It was 23-5. So that's really, really good. And he ended the season with 2,706 yards. And he was also the first team in his conference. So you like what you saw from him on the JUCO level. It's about stepping up. Now you're on the FCS subdivision. You're going to be looking for more. I was trying to think if that if that ruling affected him. I think he should have still 4 years of eligibility. Or maybe I'm just thinking about what I say is going to happen. Yeah, the ruling was actually just for a specific year at JUCO, but I think as time goes on, JUCO is going to be its own thing, and you're going to get 4 years of eligibility beyond just your JUCO years. But that's me projecting. That's me projecting and predicting on what I believe will happen. But as we push forward, Tuskegee schedule, it ain't no cakewalk. It's far from it. They have 2 FCS teams on their schedule, and I love this for Tuskegee. I'm gonna break it all down as we continue and continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. And if you haven't bought your tickets for the NBA Finals Game 3 in Indiana, it is not too late. I know what you may be thinking, but it's game day. That's why we have Game Time. Because even all the way up to the last minute, you can see the best prices. You can see the best seats. If you want to have just a general range and say, okay, I want to be in this area, what's my best seat? They'll find it for you. They're going to give you last minute zone deals. They're going to give you game time deals. And sometimes the tickets are available up to 15 minutes after the game starts, not after it ends. If you buy tickets after the game ended, you have been scammed. And this is no scam. It's game time. It's game time. That's at the end of the day. So even if it's not the NBA, maybe you want to go to a baseball game. Maybe you want to go to a hockey game. Maybe you want to go to a play, a theater, or a comedy show, whatever it may be. Go ahead and go to Game Time for your tickets. And if you're new, when you download the app, use the code LOCKEDONCollege and you get $20 off your first purchase. As we continue rolling on today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day. Clearly, I'm trying to get this thing over, I guess. I keep trying to say wrap up. But as we continue pushing, make sure you're making Locked On NBA your second listen of the day, because Game 3 tonight. You want to make sure that you are live and prepped for that. Right now, we're going to go over Tuskegee's schedule. And Kelly Flick said that Tuskegee has the toughest schedule in the SIAC. I want to make sure I give him credit, because he was the person who I've seen first say this. And quite frankly, I cannot agree more. This is a very tough schedule that you're looking for out of Tuskegee, or you're looking at out of Tuskegee. And they start off with Winston-Salem State. The first team that they play is Winston-Salem State. It's a nice little CIAA football versus SIAC football. So you love that. And listen, Winston-Salem State had a pretty solid year last year. They went 5-2 in conference play. They went 7-3 overall. So you're looking at a quality team. They end up being fourth in the SIAC, but that's okay, because it was a matter of one game. Virginia Union and Virginia State both went 6-1. Johnson C. Smith and Winston-Salem State both went 5-2. So I guess technically they're really third, but Johnson C. Smith had a better overall, so I kind of give them that edge. They went 8-2 versus 7-3, but all in all, in conference play, this is one of the best teams from the CIAA last year. And they already said it's going to be Ram tough. But let me read to you the schedule that Tuskegee has for themselves. You go week 1, you go Winston-Salem State. Then you go Benedict, Albany State, Miles, Central State, Fort Valley State, Allen, Alabama State, Jackson State, Morehouse, Lane. And they have homecoming at the very last game. Shout out to them. I wanted to have a last game homecoming. But you're looking at a 3-game home stretch where you go, I read it actually out of order, but forgive me for that. But you have September 6th, September 27th, and then October 25th where you're at home. But you have multiple weeks where you got to go back-to-back on the road, and that's tough. You got to go to Jackson. You got to go to Benedict. You got to go to Morehouse, even though that's on technically a neutral site. But you got to travel from Morehouse. You got to go to Albany. And you get back-to-back home games with Allen and Lane, but then you close out with Miles and Alabama State. Granted, those aren't extremely long travels, but they're still not playing at home, and that's still a thing. Central State is going to be their first home game, and we know that's going to be a night game for them. But the games that Kelly Flicks had pointed out was Winston-Salem in week 1, Jackson State week 3, Fort Valley State week 5, Albany State week 7. Miles week 11, Alabama State week 12. The first thing that jumped off my screen when I looked at this was the idea of playing two FCS schools. And I've always criticized FCS schools for playing D2 schools, but now I'm looking at it from the other side of the vantage point. And I love that they're playing these FCS schools. That's called being battle tested. It's the exact opposite of what I say when I talk about the FCS schools. So, yeah, do I like that Jackson State is playing Tuskegee? Not really. To be honest, I don't love that. I don't care a lot because they've been good. So they get to do things like that and me not feel the need to criticize them. But all in all, I don't love it in general. But on the D2 side, if you playing up like that, that should be a good bar for you to test yourself. I understand that we see a lot of D2 schools pull off an upset almost to the point where I don't really want to call it an upset. It's just a victory over a bigger school. But when it comes to Tuskegee, playing Jackson State is going to be a test, and it should leave them battle tested for when they have to play some of their other in-conference opponents. Note the time frame of that. So you go Winston-Salem State, CIAA, one of the best teams in that conference. Then you go Central State, and then you go Jackson State. So just week 3, before you have the large lump of your conference schedule, you get to play Jackson State. And let me see if you end up having a bye week after that, actually. You don't. You don't have a bye week before or after that. And that's a tough pill. That's a tough pill. Dang, when is their bye week? Oh, October 11th after Morehouse. So technically not back-to-back with Morehouse versus Albany, but still. Excuse me. But I note that. I don't have a problem with Alabama State because that's the Turkey Day class. Like, you got a lot. You got a lot when it comes to that. So that's tradition. And I have no criticism when it comes to traditional rivalries between D2 and FCS HBCUs. No problem with that being on the schedule. But when I saw Jackson State and Alabama State on Tuskegee's schedule, I thought back to one of the comments I read from Reginald Ruffin, the athletic director at Tuskegee, just 2 weeks ago, maybe. I don't know. We've talked about Tuskegee each of the last 2 weeks. I just don't know which time we spoke about this. But he said, for now, we're just going to continue to sell out the crowd, and we have to go play FCS schools and be your largest attendance when we play those schools. This was talking about moving up to the FCS level, but this isn't the route I want to take today. The reason I find this is important is because they have a concerted effort to schedule FCS schools. Whatever their intention is their intention. But I think that it's going to end up benefiting them as they're going to be a school that is prepared for the SIAC's best. They're going to be a school that is prepared to step into the lion den when it comes to their own conference because they're playing teams like Jackson State. If you're playing Jackson State to show that you can travel, show up, and you can be prepared for the FCS level, that's cool. That's fine and dandy. But that's not what's going to happen in 2025. In 2025, you're going to have to take that game, stay healthy, hopefully show some fight because Lane got demolished last year, but hopefully you show some fight and now you're able to be battle tested and you play tougher teams. I do think that matters. When you play, your strength of schedule matters. That's one of the reasons that I push so heavily against playing D2 schools when you're FCS school, because it does matter for perception and it does matter for how your team is prepared. You can just coach your way around it. You just need good coaches. That's my opinion. But then you look at their in-conference schedule. In conference, you get Miles 10-0 last year. Fort Valley State 6-2 last year. Albany State 6-2 last year. That's 3 of the schools that were above Tuskegee in the 2024 standings. And when you look at it, Albany State, road game. Fort Valley State is a home game. But then you also look at Miles, and that's a road game. I wonder what Miles is going to be now that Coach Shade is out of the picture and you're losing some stuff. But all in all, they are having to play the best teams from last year. They're having to go on the road in 2 of the 3 matchups that I just laid out. And then they also have 2 FCS schools on their schedule. This is a really tough schedule for Tuskegee. What Flick said is right. This is a very, very, well, he said it's the toughest. I don't want to go through and look at every single one, but this is up there. And it's hard for me to imagine somebody beating that. Tuskegee finished 5th in the conference, and they're playing everybody above them other than Clark Atlanta. Everybody who was 6-2 or better, or 8-2 or better. Wait a minute. Why do I have Miles at 10-0? I have Miles at 10-0, and these other schools are at 6-2. Now I'm no genius. Nah, that ain't right. Something's wrong there. Cause now I'm looking again and they have Miles at 12-0. Something's up, y'all. But I do know that Miles went undefeated. So whatever it was, 8-0, maybe. That's crazy. Well, I guess you also got to count in for the conference game. Let me see Miles' football schedule. Let's see what they have on their own officials on their own official. 8-0. Yeah, that's makes much more sense. They only played 13 games. But 13-0. I mean 8-0. They went 8-0 in conference play. But regardless, you're talking about undefeated with Miles. You're talking about only a couple of losses with Fort Valley and Albany State. These are tough games. And speaking of tough games, you got Norfolk State versus Duke, a home and home series that I think is really good for the university as long as Duke travels. As long as Duke travels, this will be really good for Norfolk. And we'll break it all down as we continue and wrap up, this time for real wrap up, today's episode of Locked on HBCU. As we're wrapping up today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day, making it all the way to segment 3, and I thank you 2 times for that. Thank you. Thank you. Norfolk State just pulled off a masterpiece when it comes to their ability to network, their ability to market, and their ability to pull in a big time matchup against Duke. They're going to have a home and home versus a school that they've actually only played one time and they never scheduled them. The only time that you've seen Norfolk State women's basketball face against Duke is in the 2003, I believe, NCAA tournament. That's it. The fact that you've only seen them play in the NCAA tournament talks about and kind of hints at the exclusivity of this whole thing. This is what AD Melody Webb had to say about the decision or the ability. I don't want to say decision, the announcement to have a home and home. Quote, "This is a landmark moment, not only for our women's basketball program, but for for our university as a whole. Bringing a nationally ranked program like Duke to Eccles Hall reflects our continued commitment to elevating Norfolk State athletics and providing our student athletes with opportunities that compete at the highest level. It also gives our fans a chance to witness elite competition right here at home and be a part of a historic event." She goes on a little bit. Let me see. And that game was in 2002 for the record. Here we go. This is the part I thought was really good. "I appreciate Coach Kara Lawson's willingness to engage in a home and home series with our institution. As we continue to strive for greater visibility for HBCUs, collaborative agreements like this are instrumental in driving progress. Her return to Norfolk will yield numerous benefits to our university, community, and city." I thought that was cool for 2 reasons. I'll start at the end. The opportunities that it brings the city only exist if Duke really travels heavy. That's how you get the greatest impact for the city. Because if Duke doesn't bring any of their fans, it's going to kind of be similar to most home games. Maybe you have more fans in Norfolk that show up, but I don't think it's going to be this surge to the economy. And it's only one day. It's a limit on how much you can really have a surge. But I do think that if Duke brings a bunch of people, that's hotels. They ain't going to go back home the same night. So that's hotels that you have to book. That is flights that you probably will have with people coming in. That's food that people are going to have to eat. Just the normal economy stuff. And I think that you're hoping that Duke brings in a bunch of people. You're hoping it's not just on a random Tuesday, to be honest. If I could, I would try to see if I can get this game on a Saturday, because I think on those type of situations, you can have people really come in. It's not on a Saturday that might actually conflict with football season. Make it a Friday. Make it a Friday. Yeah, make it a Friday. They don't care about football out of Duke. Come on now. So, but make it a Friday and you're probably good. Then your fans can still go to your football game afterwards or maybe it's on a bye week. Right? Like this, there's ways to schedule this, but being able to bring Duke to your stadium or to your arena is a big deal. It does not happen for a lot of HBCUs. It does not happen for a lot of smaller schools for you to be able to bring a big school like Duke to your university. And she mentioned Kara Lawson's return to Norfolk. I had to go do some digging because she didn't go to Norfolk State. She didn't go to school in Virginia as a collegiate athlete. So I know a lot of the stuff about her from college on, but she actually went to West Springfield, and that's about 3 hours from Norfolk State University. So this is kind of a homecoming of sorts for her. And I'm sure that she was an advocate for this because this doesn't happen without somebody advocating. If there's no advocating for this move, it doesn't happen. Trust me, Duke didn't just say, we want to go play at Norfolk State and y'all got to play here first. That didn't happen. Somebody, probably Melody Webb, connected with somebody, probably their AD, and that decision or that idea was floated past Coach Lawson, and Coach Lawson was probably all for it. And she advocated because I can assume by the success that she's had at Duke, she probably has a little bit of sway. She probably has a little bit of sway there. But I think that this is a big moment. It shows that they've lost their coach at Norfolk State. They've lost their 2-star players, but they have not lost their branding. They are still a university and a program specifically in women's basketball that holds weight. Whether it's Vickers, whether it's Wood, it doesn't matter. You have the Norfolk State women's basketball brand on your back, and this is shown by bringing in Duke. Because Duke, no matter who Kara Lawson is, no matter where she's from, if Norfolk State wasn't a school that had some juice, Duke wasn't coming. Don't matter where their coach grew up. So shout out to Norfolk State for pulling this off. It's Wednesday. I pre-recorded. I don't know what we're going to talk about on Friday. Whatever happens, hopefully no crazy news broke before this that you're like, why isn't he covering this? It's because I'm pre-recorded. I recorded this last week. All right. I'm speaking to you from the past. Not joking. Anyway, in the meantime, in between time, until next time we hear each other, family, take care, stay blessed. Peace.